Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and today's going to be a little bit different. We're really going to zero in on the Game Awards showcase, the good, the bad, the ugly, because unfortunately, not everybody was happy with everything that was announced here. Sony just revealed their big new game, and there's a lot of unhappy campers right now, and we'll get into all of that today, as well as Xbox and announcement they made. They didn't exactly make all of their fans happy either, so yeah, we'll get into both of those situations today. Luckily, though, most of the things I have to talk about today is actually very good. You know, I wasn't exactly thrilled that it was another 3.5-hour-long showcase. A little bloated, Jeff, a little bloated. But outside of that, there's actually some really exciting stuff that we need to talk about, so we'll try to get into most of the big highlights, and that actually starts off with a dormant IP that a lot of people have been asking for a long time. And that's a new Ninja Gaiden game called Ragebound, developed by Dotemu, the same studio behind Streets of Rage 4 and TMNT Shredder's Revenge. So, I mean, they're a great studio, and this is a new Metroidvania type of game. So I think this is kind of a similar situation as Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This isn't exactly the type of game that fans were necessarily asking for, but I still think it's a cool way to bring back a fan-favorite franchise that we haven't seen in a long time. And plus, I mean, Metroidvanias have grown in popularity quite extensively since the release of Hollow Knight, and I'm happy that we're starting to see bigger publishers take notice of that trend and to take initiative. I just hope that Koei Tecmo can appropriately price this game because, you know, not everybody's Nintendo and can get away with a $60 Metroidvania. Now, speaking of Metroidvanias, Bandai Namco is also putting out their own twist on the genre with an unexpected take on the iconic Pac-Man series. Pac-Man's going into a dark, twisted direction, and you have this person who's running around in the world with Pac-Man seemingly following behind, and he can eat things and also, I guess, turn into some type of monster. I don't know. This is a very bizarre twist on the Pac-Man series, but I'm at the very least intrigued. I want to see how this one shapes up, if anything else. It's titled Shadow Labyrinth, and it'll be available next year sometime in 2025. And this was kind of a theme all night long. A lot of dormant IP are returning, and that also includes one of my favorite childhood franchises being Turok. Yes, Turok is making a comeback. I absolutely loved Turok Evolution back in the day, and I mean, I've mentioned a few different times on the channel that I would be thrilled to see its return. I don't think that we have near enough dinosaur games in the modern era, so, you know, they answered here, but, okay, I also have to say that it's not necessarily what I was expecting. I envisioned it more like a Doom-style first-person shooter because, you know, that's really what this franchise was, but with dinosaurs and some really unique weapons. However, they shifted it over to a third-person shooter. Now, I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about that just yet, but the nostalgia is still certainly there, so I hope it turns out well. Onimusha is yet another game set for a return, and this one is long overdue. The original Onimusha games had some similarities with the classic Resident Evil games, but instead of, you know, shooting zombies, you instead slay demons, and a more of a hack-and-slash style of game. They're dark and they're gritty, and I think there's a lot of potential with all the technology that we have today, and I'm actually really excited about this one. I think Capcom is one of the best powerhouses in the game industry right now. I have a lot of confidence in them, so I'm excited to see what they do with the Onimusha series. However, it's going to be a few years before we actually get to play it ourselves, as they teased it for 2026. Now, Capcom wasn't finished there, though, because they also shocked everybody by bringing back Okami with a brand new sequel developed by none other than Hideki Kamiya himself. Yeah, so Kamiya recently left Platinum Games, and this might have been the reason why. Capcom apparently wound up giving him his own studio titled Clover. So Okami is coming back with its original creator, and kind of similar to what we're seeing with Hironobu Sakaguchi and Square Enix, this is a bit of a heartfelt reunion between a very special developer and his former publisher. As for Okami, though, the first game is still one of the most special games that you'll ever find. It's just this really artistic, Zelda-like experience, and it's always been highly praised and highly beloved for a good reason. I'd easily recommend it. It's even available on modern platforms, so it's pretty easy to get into. The thing about the sequel, though, is that I think most of us kind of gave up on a sequel a long time ago, and that's why it's come back again with Hideki Kamiya on board with Capcom is nothing short of an amazing surprise. I mean, there were rumors about a Dream game possibly being at this event, but I don't think anybody was expecting Okami to be announced. However, this game is likely still years out. I think development pretty much started probably fairly recently, so just kind of prepare for a long wait. Now, this next game, though, technically isn't from a dormant IP, but it is similar in a sense that it comes off as a spiritual successor, and that's Gen Design's new game. Now, this is a new studio formed by the developers behind the Eco trilogy, and for me, both Eco and Shadow of the Colossus is high up on my list for some of my favorite games ever made. And you can tell that this comes from the same people. It's got those same somber vibes to it and the climbing that you would expect to see from something like Shadow of the Colossus. However, there's really not much else known about this game. It doesn't even have a title yet. It was a very short teaser. But at the very least, this is a game that I think is definitely worth keeping on your radar. Now, Sonic Racing Crossworlds is another franchise set for a comeback, but this was a super quick teaser. There's not really much I can say about it, but I hope it's a return to its former glory. I know a lot of people didn't exactly care about the team-focused aspect on the previous title. I thought it was okay, but the good news here is that Crossworlds will be available in 2025, so we shouldn't have to wait all that long for a more detailed look. Borderlands 4 also got an official reveal, and I know this is a mega popular franchise and definitely one of the better cooperative series ever made. So, as long as they put together a quality title, this will probably be a pretty massive game, and as you'd expect, it's got that appealing cel-shaded art style to it. If anything else, it seems like for the most part, fans are seemingly enjoying its first reveal. Virtual Fighter is also another game set for a return, and there's two things pretty incredible about this announcement. One is that this is the first brand new mainline Virtual Fighter game that we've seen since 2006. Yeah, it's actually crazy that it's been that long, but even more so here, RGG, as a studio, is making everybody just kind of look foolish right now. I don't know how they do it, but they somehow manage to pump out high-quality games on an almost yearly basis by this point. Not only do they have the Yakuza Pirate game early next year, but now they have Virtual Fighter, and on top of that, they also revealed a brand new game in development titled Project Century. Now, this is only an early teaser for the time being, but it seemingly shares a lot in common with the Yakuza franchise, albeit a lot more gory. There's a lot of gore in this one, to say the least, but just knowing their pedigree, this is an immediate wish list for me. Now, we also got a reveal for Hazelight's next game. Joseph Ferris was as charismatic as ever. He's just so fun to listen to. And he mentioned being cocky about this next game here, titled Split Fiction. And I agree with him. I think he has every right to be cocky because it, once again, looks incredible. It follows a very similar cooperative approach as It Takes Two. But if it's possible, it somehow looks even more creative. That last game was already incredibly creative, but you can see here, each level is just so completely different. Each idea is just so completely unique. And one of the cool things about this game is that his main characters are inspired by his two daughters. To me, I think that says a lot about him as a person, and I think it just radiates into his games. We so often talk about how soulless the AAA game industry can be at times, but if there's one studio that you can just tell is passionate and just loves games, this is the team. So I'm super excited to try Split Fiction when it releases actually early next year on March 6th. Now, let's go and get into those big AAA games, though, because there's three in specific that everybody is talking about. One of those, and this is the one that's pretty much guaranteed to be good because FromSoft just doesn't miss, and that's Elden Ring Night Reign. Now, I was not expecting this announcement. This is a new standalone entry, and truthfully, I kind of feel like they should have done the same thing with Shadow of the Erdtree, just considering its scope. But nonetheless, it's a spinoff that seems to prioritize multiplayer. Now, I don't know exactly how that will work out just yet. The entire Soulsborne series already has multiplayer elements involved, but it seems like there is maybe a greater focus on it this time. Now, I assume you can still play by yourself. That's the way it appears to be in the trailer, but it's set to release sometime next year. So, I mean, I just mentioned that RGG is making everybody look bad. Well, we can also kind of say that FromSoft, does the same thing. This is another one of those studios that are just pumping out great game after great game after great game. And hopefully, Night Rain will fall into that category. Now, one of my favorite games from last generation, though, was The Witcher 3. If you've ever watched any of my best of type of videos, you would probably know that I had it in my top 3 pretty consistently. So to say that I'm excited about The Witcher 4 is a little bit of an understatement, and to see it at the Game Awards was pretty amazing. Now, unfortunately, this is only a CGI trailer for the time being, but I think it looks pretty good, and we did learn a few interesting tidbits here. Most notably is that Ciri is the main character in the next game, and I know a lot of people wanted to play as Geralt, and I can completely understand that. I have an attachment to him as well, but I always thought it was fairly obvious that she was next up. They were always kind of building her up as a powerful character and as an understudy to Geralt. In fact, in The Witcher 3, you were already able to play as her as is, and her powers made for a very different type of combat. I don't know. It just kind of felt like they were building into her story. So I'm a little surprised by some of the reactions online, but for Geralt fans, though, Geralt's voice was used at the end of the trailer, and that could indicate that he will still play an important part in The Witcher 4. Who knows? We might even play as him in certain sections of the game, kind of similar to how we played as Ciri in The Witcher 3. All things considered, though, I think this game is still likely a ways off, but yeah, I'm very excited to say the least. Then for the final announcement of the night. Okay. I'm not quite as confident about this game, and that's Intergalactic. This is Naughty Dog's new IP, and it's pretty much exactly what it was speculated to be, and I think a lot of people probably even predicted the vibes that they were going to go with just based on who is directing this game. Whatever the case may be, though, this is a new sci-fi action-adventure with a heavy emphasis on its narrative. Again, as you would expect from Naughty Dog. However, its trailer, I don't think, is giving a good first impression. And the reason I say that is because the evidence is there. Like the production value is great, and that's to be expected. Again, we're talking about Naughty Dog out of all companies. They're a masterclass when it comes to cinematics and narrative-driven gameplay. But it's almost like that's kind of turned into a double-edged sword for them, because a lot of people play their games specifically for their narrative and their characters. And that's where there's this disconnect with this new era of Naughty Dog. Uncharted 1 through 4 are among my top 3 favorite franchises ever made. Crash Bandicoot also sits high on my list. I don't feel quite the same about Jak and Daxter, but I like those games, and I think The Last of Us Part 1 is an all-time great story in gaming. What really elevates a lot of those games, though, not all of them, but a lot of them, are the stories and their characters that you can easily connect with. Nathan Drake is probably my favorite character in gaming, and I loved how his story and his character evolved through the 5 mainline games, including Golden Abyss. This also carried over to The Last of Us Part 1. I can't say that Joel as a character is righteous, and some of his decisions are suspect to say the least. But his dynamic with Ellie was very special, and it was a heartfelt journey for the audience. It's a beautifully told story where you, the player, can connect with its characters that are honestly in just a crappy situation. In Part 2, however, that was Naughty Dog's first game that didn't receive universal praise from the audience. It was much more difficult for a large portion of the audience to connect with its characters. So regardless of whether you loved it or you hated it, I know there's this polarizing back and forth about this game. The fact is that it was a very polarizing experience. And that's primarily because one of Naughty Dog's main selling points is their writing. A lot of people did not like the writing in Part 2. And even though Neil Druckmann has dismissed its backlash, it seemingly has tarnished their brand to the point that there's already a ton of skepticism for their newest game. If you look at the trailers for Intergalactic on YouTube, you'll notice that every video has an overly negative response, with the majority of people disliking it. Even on the main Naughty Dog channel, they turned off the comments. And that's never a good sign. It just shows you that they're hiding something, and that is the backlash that we are seeing online. Yeah, the conversation of did they tarnish their brand, I think, is a very real thing. I think it kind of says a lot about Part 2's backlash and just how much it upset people. A lot of fans no longer trust Naughty Dog, and they weren't happy about this new trailer that mostly showcased its narrative. And its writing, once again, seems more similar to Part 2's vibes than what it does for some of their earlier and more praised games. Now, maybe they'll come out and prove everybody wrong when they showcase more gameplay. But for an early impression, this is our first impression, I don't think that it could have gone much worse for Sony and their flagship studio. What we do know, though, is that it's been in development for 4 years, so I would expect it to be several more years before we play it ourselves. Let me hear what sides you sit on, though, because I expect this to be a very polarizing topic. Did you enjoy the first trailer for Intergalactic, or are you on the side that is concerned by what we're seeing? Now, there's one last game that I want to talk about here, and this was kind of a peculiar announcement that quickly got brushed over, and I think some of that's just because all of the other big announcements that were revealed last night. But surprisingly, The Outer Worlds 2 got revealed for a 2025 release, which means Obsidian actually has 2 games planned for a single year. I mean, that's pretty impressive stuff to have 2 big games for a single year, but it seems like it's pretty much like the first Outer Worlds game, but bigger in scope. They amusingly said that it took them 3 times as long to make it 2 times as large. You know, their humor has been on point, if anything else, in their advertising. But the big shocker here is that this will be another Xbox first-party multi-platform game. It's coming to PlayStation 5 day one. I mean, I guess the first game was already multi-platform, so maybe that's why they decided to support PlayStation. But definitely, a decision that I know not everybody will agree with. So let me know what you all think about that in the comments below. I actually made a video about this topic just yesterday and what I think Xbox might be doing for their next generation consoles. Make sure to check that video out. But yeah, yes, Outer Worlds falls into that category as well. Those are my big highlights, though. I'm sure I probably missed something here, so let me hear about what game caught your attention last night. But overall, I'd give the showcase a C+. Like, that might sound low, but that's really more because of its pacing than the actual announcements themselves. I mean, for the most part, I was really satisfied in terms of its reveals, but I mean, I just despise the pacing of Jeff Keighley events. Something that I am happy about, though, is the fact that Astrobot won Game of the Year. They even thanked Nintendo without naming them, and I thought that was a really respectful way to pay homage to one of their inspirations. Clearly, Astrobot was inspired by Mario, and this confirms that. But you know what? That doesn't stop it from being amazing. Most games were, in fact, inspired by something else. So I just don't understand that controversy. But I agree, it is definitely one of the best platformers that I've ever played. So I was happy to see it win Game of the Year, and I hope it helps its sales numbers surge. Anyways, though, I'm going to go and call that an episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, and peace out.